I've always been the kind of guy who can't leave a mystery alone. Maybe that's why Ethan and I became friends in the first place. Small towns like ours don't offer much in the way of excitement, so the two of us found our own, usually in places we probably weren't supposed to be. I'd spent my whole life in this tiny, rain-soaked town in the Pacific Northwest, where towering evergreens cast shadows that stretch for miles. It was peaceful, sure, but that quiet always left me restless, like something was missing. And Ethan, well, he was the only other person I knew who seemed to feel the same. He introduced me to urban exploration, where you go out at night and explore abandoned places. Sure, it's technically trespassing, but as Ethan always said, it's not illegal if nobody catches you. We'd explored our fair share of decayed buildings and empty houses. Nothing major, just enough to scratch that itch for adventure. But this time was different. It was a warm July afternoon when I first noticed it, a strange ivy-covered chimney looming in the distance on my drive home from school. It looked ancient, almost like it had grown out of the earth itself, hidden in plain sight. I'd driven that road 100 times and never noticed it before. But that day, it felt like it was calling out to me. Curiosity gnawed at me until I finally called Ethan and told him about it. "You're sure it was a chimney?" he asked, excitement creeping into his voice. "Yeah, big too. Looked like it hadn't been touched in years." "Well, I know what we're doing tonight," said Ethan. By 9:30 I'd picked him up, and we were on our way. The sun had set, and darkness settled over the roads like a heavy blanket. Ethan had done some research on the place during our drive. As he read aloud, my curiosity gave way to unease. It turns out the building was once an asylum, dating back to the early 1900s. People said it was built to house the lost and the troubled, a place for those the world didn't want to see. Eventually, it was converted into a regular hospital, and later a tuberculosis ward during the outbreak. By the 1980s, after years of financial troubles and neglect, it was abandoned. That chimney I'd seen was part of the crematorium. The road grew narrower and darker as the trees closed in on either side. The silence in the car was tense, broken only by the gravel crunching under the tires and the distant hum of cicadas. There was something unsettling about driving toward a place that had seen so much suffering, so much death. We parked about a quarter-mile away, hidden off the road behind a line of trees. The moon was little more than a sliver, casting faint patches of silver across the woods. Ethan and I didn't speak. We didn't need to. We knew the drill. Flashlights in hand, we walked east through the trees until we reached an old train track, rusted and overgrown with weeds. It felt surreal, walking down those tracks in the pitch black, with only the sound of our footsteps echoing into the night. Every so often I'd glance over my shoulder, half expecting to see someone, or something, lurking just beyond the tree line. As we neared the hospital, I noticed a low rumble in the distance, barely audible over the breeze. At first, I thought it was just the wind playing tricks on me, but the closer we got, the louder it became. Finally, we saw it. A small portable generator, its dim light casting eerie shadows across the building's exterior. Thick ivy climbed the crumbling brick walls, swallowing windows and wrapping around the building like a green straitjacket. It was as if the earth itself was trying to pull the place back down, to bury it and forget. Ethan nudged me, nodding toward a boarded-up window where an extension cord slipped through a gap in the plywood. "Someone's here," he whispered. I swallowed, my throat dry. Maybe it's a homeless camp. But even as I said it, I didn't believe it. The place felt wrong, like it was holding its breath, waiting for us to make a move. We crept along the side of the building, ducking under vines and sidestepping broken glass. The windows were mostly boarded up, but here and there, patches of filthy glass peeked through, smeared with dirt and age. Inside, I thought I saw lights flickering, shadows moving. My mind played tricks on me, and my heart pounded against my ribs, louder with each step. Finally, we found a small, unlocked door on the east side and slipped inside. The stench hit us immediately. It was thick, sour, like something rotting. I gagged, covering my mouth as my eyes watered. Ethan just took a deep breath, shining his flashlight into the darkness. "Smells like death in here," he muttered. We moved cautiously down the hallway, the beam of our flashlights casting long, shifting shadows on the graffiti-covered walls. Old hospital beds and wheelchairs cluttered the passage, some tipped over, others rusting where they stood. Every few steps, we'd pass a room with its door slightly ajar, the darkness inside swallowing up any light. It was like walking through a mausoleum, each room a tomb holding remnants of the past. As we continued, the hallway led us to a wide-open space with high ceilings. The walls were bare brick, and the windows were boarded up, letting in only slivers of moonlight. It looked like a cafeteria, with tables and chairs pushed against the walls. But what really caught my attention was the pile of shoes in the middle of the floor. Hundreds of them, scattered and piled on top of each other, like they'd been abandoned in a hurry. There were all kinds: heels, sneakers, work boots. My stomach twisted, and I fought the urge to look away. It was as if each pair held a story, a memory of someone who had been here before, someone who hadn't left. And then I saw the chains. Rusty, heavy chains hung from the ceiling, each ending in a large meat hook. The floor beneath was stained black, as if something had seeped into the concrete, leaving a mark that would never wash away. I stared, my mouth dry, my hands shaking. What is this place?" I whispered, barely able to get the words out. Ethan just shook his head, his face pale in the dim light. "Looks like a butcher's setup, but for people." The words hung between us, sinking in like stones. I couldn't shake the feeling that we were intruding on something dark, something no one was ever meant to see. That's when I noticed the red light blinking in the corner. A CCTV camera, watching us. "We're not alone," I whispered, as I gestured toward the camera. Ethan wanted to keep going. He said this was the kind of thing you only see in horror movies, and that we had to check it out. But every instinct screamed at me to leave. We started to argue, our voices low but tense. That's when we heard it, the muffled sound of a car door shutting, and heavy, deliberate footsteps coming toward the building. I froze, my heart hammering against my ribs. "Let's go," I whispered, grabbing Ethan's arm. He didn't argue this time. We turned and bolted down the hallway, retracing our steps as fast as we could without making a sound. But as we rounded a corner, Ethan tripped over an old hospital cart, sending it crashing to the floor. The noise was deafening, echoing through the empty halls. At that moment, we could hear the distant clanging of chains coming from the cafeteria. Whoever was here was now hunting us. Panic surged through me as we sprinted toward the exit, our footsteps pounding against the cracked tiles. Every corner felt like a trap, every shadow hiding something sinister. By the time we burst through the door and into the open air, I could barely breathe. We froze, caught between fight and flight. I looked at Ethan, his wide eyes mirroring my own fear. Then, as if we'd reached the same decision at the same moment, we sprinted for the woods, desperate to put distance between us and whatever waited inside that place. As we ran, I spotted a dim red light blinking high up in a tree pointed directly at us. Then another mounted on the side of the building. My stomach twisted as I realized they were everywhere, scattered across the property. The entire place was under surveillance. We dodged jagged scraps of metal, broken glass, and an overturned cart as we ran, the red lights flickering like silent alarms. Each one seemed to pulse with a cold, steady rhythm, tracking us as we darted across the grounds. Finally, we dove into the cover of the trees, crouching low and trying to control our ragged breaths. But I couldn't shake the feeling of those red lights piercing the darkness, as if they could still see us even in the shadows. From our hiding place, we could see the hospital's front entrance, bathed in the dim glow of the generator. A van was parked out front, its headlights illuminating the crumbling facade. Then, a figure appeared. A large man, his silhouette looming in the harsh light. He opened the van's back doors and pulled out something long and wrapped in plastic. It looked like a body. The man dragged the object toward the entrance, disappearing into the shadows. I felt my stomach drop, a sickening dread settling over me. Whatever was happening here, it wasn't something we were meant to see. We didn't wait to find out more. Moving as silently as we could, we slipped further into the woods, following a wide loop that took us back to the tracks and eventually our car. We never went back to that place, never told anyone either, not even the police. We were trespassing after all, and neither of us wanted to risk getting into trouble. But sometimes, in the dead of night, I lie awake, thinking about that hospital, the shoes, the chains, and the figure dragging that wrapped-up body through the doors. And still I ask myself, should I have said something? Should we have reported this to the authorities? Hey guys, thanks for watching. Please subscribe if you enjoyed today's video, and don't forget to click the notification bell so you can be notified whenever I post something.